For many years, peace had become something people finally believed in. After centuries of wars, famine, and endless power struggles, Earth had grown into a united world, strong, respected, and at last, part of the great community of intelligent life across the stars. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council, standing side by side with dozens of alien civilizations. For once it seemed that the old image of humans as violent and unpredictable had faded. At the center of this fragile hope stood Earth's leader, a woman who had earned respect even from the most cautious alien races. She had been the voice of calm when others shouted for war. She believed in unity, not domination. Her words often carried across systems, reaching colonies where children studied under artificial skies. She was the kind of leader who reminded everyone that peace was not weakness. It was strength that required courage. So when she announced that she would soon sign the Unity Accord, people everywhere celebrated. The accord was meant to end the last traces of distrust among the major powers of the galaxy. It would open trade, protect developing planets, and ensure that no species could threaten another again. Billions of people watched the preparations, knowing it would be a historic day. The signing was to be broadcast live from Geneva Orbital Station, a massive ring-shaped structure hovering above Earth's atmosphere. The entire world tuned in. Screens flickered to life across every human colony, from the domes of Mars to the floating platforms on Venus, even the mining stations orbiting Jupiter. On alien worlds, too, millions watched curiously. Some doubted the humans could hold true to peace. Others quietly admired how far this small species had come in such a short time. The leader walked to the podium, calm and confident. Her silver-gray uniform shimmered under the bright lights. Behind her, the blue curve of Earth glowed through the massive glass wall. Beautiful and fragile, she began to speak, her voice clear, steady, filled with that same warmth that had carried humanity through so many dark years. She spoke of peace, of hope, of unity among all species regardless of shape, language, or homeworld. People cheered. The moment felt eternal, almost sacred. Then, a single flash of blue light. It was small at first, like the sparkle of a star. Then it cut through the air straight toward her chest. The sound came a moment later, a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. The leader staggered. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then she fell. Panic swept through the hall. Security guards shouted. The broadcast feed flickered as people screamed. Cameras caught her falling body, the look of disbelief frozen on her face. Every screen across the galaxy went silent. The speech stopped mid-sentence. The assassin had struck. Within seconds, chaos took over. Guards scanned the area for threats, but the shooter was gone. The station's sensors detected a ship breaking through the docking bay shields, a small craft sleek and fast. It vanished into hyperspace before anyone could even lock on. When the footage replayed, analysts froze the image. There, burned into the side of the escaping craft, was a crimson insignia, the mark of the Voran Dominion. It was a name that made even the most seasoned diplomats go quiet. The Voran were an old and proud race, known for their towering cities and cold logic. They saw themselves as the rightful rulers of the galaxy and had never hidden their dislike for humanity. They called humans upstarts, a young species that rose too fast, too loud, and too bold. The two civilizations had clashed many times in small border disputes, but never openly. Now it seemed the unspoken hostility had turned deadly. Back on Earth, grief spread like wildfire. People poured into the streets, lighting candles and holding up pictures of the fallen leader. Some wept openly. Others stood in stunned silence. For many, she had been more than a leader. She had been the symbol of humanity's best self. The media replayed the moment again and again, searching for answers. How had the assassin slipped past the most advanced security in human history? Who had planned it? Why now, when peace was finally within reach? The Galactic Council, meeting in their shining halls above the planet of Virelia, issued statements of sorrow and concern. They promised an investigation. They urged calm, but their words felt empty. Everyone knew how these things went. Committees, delays, endless. Talk while the guilty vanished into the shadows. The council called the incident a tragic misunderstanding. Some even suggested the ship might have been stolen, that the Voran insignia could have been faked. But humans had seen the footage. They had watched the light leave their leader's eyes. and they were done listening to excuses. Behind the scenes, deep in the underground command centers beneath Mars and Earth, military officials gathered. They spoke in quiet, controlled voices, but there was no mistaking the rage that hung in the air. Humanity had been attacked. Not just one person, but the heart of their unity, their hope, their identity. For decades, Earth had tried to prove it could be peaceful, that it had learned from its violent past. But now those same old instincts stirred again. The survival instinct that had once carried their ancestors through endless wars and disasters. One of the senior commanders, a man with deep lines on his face from years of service, finally said what everyone was thinking. They think we're still the old humans, the ones who bow and ask for mercy. They've forgotten what we are. No one disagreed. Within hours, the Terran Defense Command activated secret protocols, plans that had been kept hidden since the early days of the Council. It was a defensive measure at first, or so they claimed. Fleets began moving quietly into position. Data networks lit up with encrypted orders. Military factories started working around the clock. On the surface, Earth mourned. In space, it prepared, but the galaxy was watching. Alien news networks broadcast endless analysis. Some called the assassination a test of humanity's restraint. Others warned that humans might lash out in anger. To most of the galaxy, humans were still unpredictable, a race of contradictions capable of both mercy and fury. In the great cities of the Voran Dominion, officials denied any involvement. Their spokespersons appeared calm, polite, even offended at the accusation. But their eyes told another story. There was a quiet confidence there, as if they believed humanity would do nothing. After all, in the Council's eyes, war was forbidden. Retaliation would bring sanctions. Earth would stand alone, or so they thought. Back home, the people's grief was turning into something sharper. Memorials filled every major city, from New London to the domes of Mars City. Flowers floated down rivers, and screens displayed the leader's last words. We are stronger together. But each time those words were repeated, people clenched their fists tighter. Together, yes, but not weak. Students, workers, scientists, and soldiers began volunteering for service. Thousands signed up for what they called the Unity Guard. It wasn't about revenge, they said, it was about justice, about making sure no one ever dared to harm humanity again. Across the solar system, fleets that had been sleeping for years powered up. Giant carriers rose from orbital docks, their engines glowing like suns. Drones lined up in perfect formation. New prototypes were rushed into testing. Ships with human-designed armor capable of resisting plasma fire, and railguns that could punch through planetary shields. Still, publicly, Earth remained silent. The new Acting Council of Humanity released only one short message. We will find the truth. And we will not rest. The words were calm, but the tone carried weight. Everyone knew what it meant. For the first time in decades, alien diplomats visiting Earth noticed something different in human eyes. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was resolve. A deep, silent determination that frightened them more than any weapon. In every corner of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The humans are moving. The humans are angry. The humans are preparing. The assassination, meant to cripple humanity, had instead united it in a way nothing else ever could. Billions of people who had once argued about politics, culture, and borders now stood as one. The message was clear. You can strike down one of us, but you will never break all of us. And while the rest of the galaxy debated, the Terran fleets began to disappear from their orbits, vanishing into the black. No one knew where they were going, but everyone knew why. The hunt had begun. For a few days after the assassination, Earth seemed frozen. The planet itself felt like it was holding its breath. Streets were quieter than usual, but the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was tense, full of the weight of grief and the faint hum of anger simmering beneath. People moved with purpose now, glancing at every screen, listening to every news update, trying to make sense of what had happened. The leader's face was everywhere, on every channel, every holographic display, and yet the absence behind that image felt heavier than words. Inside the command centers and underground bases, a very different energy filled the air. It wasn't grief. It wasn't sorrow. It was controlled, quiet determination. Humans had been patient for decades, showing the galaxy they could follow the rules of diplomacy. They had built alliances, respected treaties, and even restrained their anger when insulted or threatened. But this time there was no room for restraint. The evidence was clear. The assassin's ship had carried the mark of a rival empire that had always looked at humanity with suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. That the Voran Dominion, as they were called, could strike so boldly was proof that they underestimated humans. They had believed humanity would mourn silently and wait for the Council to intervene. They had believed humans were still just a young, naive species. They were wrong. Military leaders and scientists worked side by side, not just to investigate, but to prepare. Every known route of escape the assassin might have taken was analyzed. Every communication network was scanned. Every potential ally and hidden threat was reviewed. Even civilians contributed. Engineers, programmers, and volunteers offered ideas, designs, and data that the military didn't have the time to calculate. Humanity was tapping into every ounce of talent it had, not just to strike back, but to make sure nothing like this could happen again. Meanwhile, in the halls of the Galactic Council, the human delegation appeared calm. They expressed sorrow, demanded an investigation, and agreed to cooperate fully. But behind the polite smiles and careful words, the humans were quietly mobilizing the largest defensive operation in known history. Fleet movements were logged, supply chains reorganized, and advanced ships brought out of storage. The preparations were silent but massive, and the galaxy began to notice. Even the Council, proud of its authority, started to watch Earth closely. For the average person, life had changed too. Students, workers, families, everyone felt the subtle shift. People no longer argued over petty disagreements. They worked together. Communities shared resources, organized security patrols, and volunteered in ways they had never done before. It was as if the assassination had reminded humanity of its shared strength and responsibility. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival, pride, and justice. In the alien colonies, news spread quickly. Some observers began to realize that humans were not what they seemed. Many had thought of Earth as a minor player, a species still learning, still raw and impulsive. But this tragedy revealed something older and deeper. Humans could endure grief, process it, and turn it into a force that was both disciplined and unstoppable. The assassination also forced difficult decisions. Diplomats and military strategists debated the best path forward. Some argued for patience, for the slow hand of investigation and careful diplomacy. Others argued for decisive action. They said that the assassin's escape meant one thing. Humans had been attacked not for negotiation or politics, but because someone wanted them weakened, scattered, and intimidated. Humans had no choice but to respond, and respond they would. A global broadcast eventually addressed the people, not with threats, but with words that reminded them of who they were. The Acting Council of Humanity spoke calmly, their voice firm and unwavering. They reminded citizens of the sacrifices of previous generations, of every struggle that had shaped the planet, and of the promise of unity that the fallen leader had championed. They didn't glorify violence, but they made it clear that humans would not be cowed, justice would be sought, and humanity would protect itself. At the same time, every major human city and colony began reinforcing its defenses. Orbital shields were upgraded, communication networks encrypted, and emergency response teams trained for the worst. Ordinary people were invited to learn how to assist in these efforts. Students learned basic piloting and defense tactics. Engineers built new vehicles and devices for both protection and mobility. Humanity was turning every hand, every mind, every skill into a tool for survival and readiness. The hunt for the assassin became the most important mission of all. Intelligence teams scoured every system for traces of the escape ship. Advanced scanners were deployed, able to detect the faintest disturbances in hyperspace corridors. Networks of informants and scouts were activated, both on Earth and in distant colonies. No detail was too small, no observation irrelevant. Each piece of information was carefully logged and analyzed. Even the smallest lead could be the one that cracked the case wide open. As the days passed, small victories began to appear. A network of hidden contacts in distant sectors reported unusual activity. A craft matching the assassin's description was spotted near the edge of a remote system. Intercepted transmissions suggested conversations about secret weapons and military movements. These clues were pieced together carefully, forming a trail that stretched across the stars. The message was clear. The assassin was not alone, and the attack was part of a larger plan. Meanwhile, across Earth, communities held vigils for the fallen leader. The ceremonies were quiet, reflective, but never hopeless. People shared stories of her courage, her patience, and her unwavering faith in humanity. It was a reminder that humans could be strong without being cruel, disciplined without being cold. They were reminded that the fight ahead was not just military, it was moral. The people were not just defending themselves, they were defending the principles that made them human. In private, military leaders held tense meetings. They reviewed every scenario, every possible outcome. They ran simulations for months and hours, testing strategies that could protect humans and target the forces behind the assassination. Every weapon, every ship, every soldier was accounted for. Plans for rapid deployment, ambushes, and containment were drawn and redrawn. Precision, speed, and coordination became the guiding principles. At the same time, humans prepared for another challenge: diplomacy. Even as they mobilized, they understood that not every conflict could be solved by force. Envoys and negotiators were ready, trained to speak in languages of truth and clarity. Their task was simple but vital. Let the galaxy know that humanity did not seek unnecessary war, but it would not tolerate injustice. They were ready to stand firm against intimidation, to demand respect, and to protect their people. Throughout all this, the people never lost sight of the human side of the story. Families continued to grieve. Teachers comforted students. Volunteers distributed aid to those affected by shock and panic. The story of the fallen leader became a unifying symbol, not a tool for anger. It reminded everyone that strength was not just measured in weapons or fleets, but in courage, resilience, and the willingness to act for the greater good. Even in the darkest moments, there were sparks of hope. Communities found ways to support one another. Colonies that had once competed for resources now shared freely. Scientists collaborated across systems, combining knowledge to create better defenses and tools. Humanity had turned grief into determination, anger into focus, and fear into courage. At the edge of the galaxy, the Voran Dominion watched silently. They believed that humanity would falter under grief, that the species would hesitate out of fear of consequences. They underestimated the very thing that had made humans strong for millennia: the refusal to give up, the ability to learn, adapt, and respond with intelligence and precision. Soon, it became clear that the hunt was not just about catching one assassin. It was about sending a message. Humanity would not be intimidated. Humanity would not bend. Humanity would defend itself and the principles it had fought for, no matter the cost. The fleets, hidden in secret locations, were ready to move at a moment's notice. Soldiers, pilots, and strategists waited for the signal. The networks of spies and informants had mapped the enemy's movements. Communications were secured, strategies rehearsed, and contingency plans in place. The people were ready, not just to react, but to act decisively. And yet, despite all this preparation, the humans remained true to their nature. There was patience. There was strategy. There was intelligence. Every action was deliberate, every decision carefully weighed. This was not mindless retaliation. It was a response born of discipline, courage, and a deep understanding of what was at stake. The galaxy watched, some with fear, some with curiosity, some with disbelief, and for the first time everyone understood something important. Humanity had changed. The species that once struggled for survival on a single planet had now proven it could survive betrayal, grief, and danger across the stars. It was no longer a species to underestimate. The assassination had shattered the calm, yes, but it had also forged a new unity, a sharper focus, and an unshakable resolve. Humanity was ready for whatever came next, and deep in the command centers, the leaders of humanity prepared to move, to strike, and to ensure that no one would ever again think of Earth as we. The hunt for the assassin had begun in earnest. Across Earth and its colonies, intelligence networks were buzzing with activity. Every signal was scanned, every communication intercepted, every anomaly investigated. The assassin's escape route was like a spider web, stretching across countless star systems, and every thread was being followed. Human operatives worked tirelessly, coordinating across planets, colonies, and orbital stations. They were looking for one target, but they knew the mission was bigger than just one life. It was about uncovering the conspiracy behind the attack and ensuring that the people of Earth would never be threatened like this again. The assassin had been trained to perfection. Every movement, every decision was calculated to avoid detection. Yet humans were persistent. They had spent centuries learning how to survive under impossible odds, and now, that same determination was being applied to this search. Analysts pored over satellite images, navigational logs, and energy readings, looking for the smallest hint. One minor signal could reveal the path, and humans were ready to catch it. At the same time, a small strike team was assembled for a special mission. These operatives were not just soldiers. They were some of the best minds and bodies in human space operations. Their task was dangerous. They were to infiltrate systems controlled by the Voran Dominion, gather intelligence, and if possible, capture the assassin. Every member of the team understood the stakes. This mission was not about glory or recognition. It was about survival, justice, and sending a message that humanity would not be intimidated. The team traveled in silence, navigating through the void between stars. The emptiness of space pressed in around them. Yet there was an intensity in the ship that could be felt even through the hull. Every alert, every sensor reading, every distant blip on the navigation screen was analyzed with care. The crew knew that a single mistake could end their mission before it began. When they arrived at the suspected location of the assassin, the reality of the situation became clear. The target was not operating alone. Evidence suggested that a network of operatives, weapons, and resources had been established to strike at humanity. It was a larger plan than anyone had initially imagined. Yet humans did not falter. They adapted, strategized, and moved forward with a precision that had become their trademark. The first step was observation. Human operatives studied the environment, noting every patrol, every ship movement, every defensive system. It was not enough to rush in blindly. The goal was not just to catch one assassin. It was to dismantle the network, gather evidence, and prevent further attacks. Patience, intelligence, and coordination were the tools of the mission. Meanwhile, back on Earth and its colonies, the response was underway. Fleets were being mobilized quietly, moving into strategic positions while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. Factories worked around the clock, producing equipment and supplies. Every citizen who could contribute did so. Engineers, technicians, and even volunteers from local communities were enlisted to ensure that humanity could defend itself if the situation escalated. The planet itself was alive with activity, not just in response to the assassination, but in preparation for the larger conflict that seemed inevitable. As intelligence reports continued to come in, the picture of the assassin's network became clearer. There were safe zones, hidden bases, and hidden caches of weapons throughout the galaxy. Each piece of information added to a growing map of human response. Analysts traced supply lines, studied patrol patterns, and identified weak points in enemy operations. The human approach was methodical, careful, and relentless. Every detail mattered. Every small clue could change the outcome. The strike team began to move closer to the target, using stealth technology and carefully calculated routes. They avoided detection, moving through the shadows of space like a ghost. When they observed enemy positions, they did so silently, recording and analyzing everything. Every patrol route, every security measure, every routine became part of the intelligence that would guide the next steps of the mission. The humans also had another advantage: their creativity and unpredictability. Where technology could be matched, humans brought ingenuity. They adapted on the fly, turning unexpected obstacles into opportunities. When sensors failed or routes were blocked, the team found alternative paths. When communications were jammed, they improvised signals and codes that only their allies could interpret. It was a combination of discipline and intuition, and it made them a force that could not easily be predicted. During one critical operation, the strike team discovered a base hidden in a remote asteroid field. From the outside, it appeared abandoned, a mere collection of rocks floating silently in space. But hidden inside were supplies, weapons, and intelligence that linked directly to the assassin's plan. Human operatives carefully documented everything, scanning for details that would expose the larger network. It was a reminder that even the most careful enemies could not hide from human perseverance. While the strike team operated in space, Earth continued to prepare for the eventual confrontation. Strategic decisions were made about fleet movements, supply routes, and defense priorities. Citizens trained in emergency response, medical aid, and technical support. The planet itself was becoming a coordinated living system, ready to respond to threats while maintaining its normal functions. It was a display of unity, determination, and the remarkable capacity of humans to act together when faced with danger. Back in the command centers, there was also a focus on diplomacy. Humans understood that strength alone would not secure their future. Envoys were ready to communicate with the Galactic Council, with neutral species, and even with potential adversaries. The message was clear. Humanity sought justice, not unnecessary war. But if attacked again, they would respond decisively. It was a careful balance of patience and power, intelligence and resolve. As the strike team moved deeper into the enemy's territory, the challenges grew. Enemy patrols became more frequent, security measures more advanced. Yet human operatives did not give in. They adapted, studied, and moved with calculated precision. They were not reckless. Every move was weighed, every risk calculated. Even in the void of space far from Earth, their determination was unshakable. During these missions, human ingenuity proved crucial. Improvised strategies, quick thinking, and resourcefulness allowed the team to overcome obstacles that could have been deadly. They used the environment to their advantage, predicted enemy behavior, and coordinated actions across vast distances. It was a demonstration of one of humanity's greatest strengths: the ability to turn intelligence, creativity, and teamwork into decisive action. Meanwhile, news of humanity's response began to circulate quietly in the galaxy. Some species watched with concern, others with admiration. Humans were proving that they were more than just survivors. They were thinkers, planners, and doers. They could grieve, yet act with clarity and determination. They could be patient, yet unyielding when justice was at stake. It was a combination that many had underestimated. Back on Earth, the families of the fallen leader continued to mourn. Yet they also supported the mission. They understood that the response was not just about revenge, it was about ensuring the safety and future of humanity. The leader's vision of unity and strength guided every action, reminding everyone that the fight was for more than survival. It was for the principles that had always defined humanity. Over time, the strike team made progress. They identified key individuals in the network, tracked shipments of weapons, and discovered communications that revealed broader plans. Each piece of intelligence was critical, forming a clearer picture of the threat and how to neutralize it. Every discovery reinforced the need for careful, coordinated action. The galaxy itself seemed to watch and wait. Some civilizations were quietly reassessing their alliances, recognizing that humans could not be dismissed as weak or inexperienced. The assassination had been intended as a blow to humanity, but instead it had revealed the true strength of the species. Humans could endure grief, adapt to danger, and act with intelligence and determination. They could respond in ways that were both strategic and human, precise and principled. As the missions continued, humans faced moral and ethical challenges as well. Every action was weighed not only for effectiveness, but for the long-term consequences. Civilians, operatives, and leaders alike considered the impact of each decision. The goal was not destruction for its own sake, it was justice, prevention, and survival. Humanity's response would define their character, showing the galaxy not just what humans could do, but who they were at their core. By the end of the first cycle of operations, the strike team had gathered enough intelligence to identify the core elements of the network behind the assassination. They understood that the assassin was part of a larger plan, one that involved multiple planets and resources spread across systems. The challenge ahead was enormous, but humans were ready. They had learned patience, strategy, and coordination under pressure. They had learned that every detail mattered, and that even the smallest clue could lead to the greatest breakthrough. Back on Earth, preparations for a larger response continued. Fleets were positioned, weapons readied, and communities trained. Intelligence teams worked continuously to win. The galaxy had been watching, and humans knew it. After weeks of careful preparation, intelligence gathering, and strategy planning, the time had come. Humanity could no longer wait. They had tracked the assassin, uncovered parts of the network behind the attack, and discovered the scale of the threat. It was clear that the assassination was not an isolated event. It was a deliberate strike meant to weaken humanity, to show the galaxy that humans were still vulnerable. But humans had a different idea. They had learned patience. They had learned strategy. They had learned resilience. Now they would demonstrate that no one could intimidate them, and no one could underestimate them again. Fleets that had once remained quietly in orbit around Earth and its colonies now moved into position. Massive ships, polished and equipped with new technology, cut through the darkness of space, their engines glowing softly like distant stars. They were not the largest fleets in the galaxy, but they were precise, coordinated, and designed for effectiveness rather than sheer size. Every ship had a purpose. Every crew member knew their role. Every movement was part of a larger plan. Civilians were involved too. On Earth, students, engineers, scientists, and volunteers worked alongside the military, producing supplies, repairing equipment, and running simulations. Hospitals were prepared for potential emergencies. Communications teams ensured that every message was encrypted and every route secure. Humanity was mobilized in a way that no other species had ever seen. It was not just the fleet that was moving, it was the planet itself, every mind and hand working in perfect coordination. The first phase of Retaliation was precise. Humans had no intention of attacking blindly or causing unnecessary harm. The goal was to send a clear message. Humanity would not be intimidated and it would respond intelligently. Targets were selected carefully, focusing on locations linked directly to the assassination plot. Ships, weapons depots, and command centers tied to the network were identified. The strike was calculated, aimed at disrupting operations rather than causing chaos. The humans launched their first wave of attacks. Relativistic missiles, cyber strikes, and precision strikes disabled enemy systems with surgical accuracy. Communication networks were disrupted, preventing coordination between enemy bases. Supply lines were cut. Surveillance satellites revealed movements of enemy fleets, and human forces adjusted their strategies in real time. It was a demonstration of discipline, intelligence, and control. Despite the precision, the attacks were fierce. The humans understood that this was a battle for survival, for justice, and for respect. Every action sent a message across the stars. Humans were not a species to be manipulated or underestimated. They were capable of organized, decisive, and effective response when provoked. The enemy had anticipated some resistance, but not this level of coordination. Humans were moving faster than expected, striking simultaneously in multiple sectors, overwhelming the enemy's ability to respond. For every attempted attack on human assets, the humans had already predicted and countered it. Every patrol route, every security measure, every defensive system encountered by human forces was studied and adapted to in real time. The first significant confrontation occurred near a cluster of asteroids used by the enemy as a hidden base. Human ships moved into position silently, avoiding detection until the last possible moment. Then, without warning, coordinated strikes disabled the enemy's defenses, leaving them unable to respond effectively. The base was neutralized, key intelligence was captured, and the humans withdrew without unnecessary loss. The galaxy watched in awe. While fleets engaged in space, cyber warfare teams worked relentlessly. Communications, financial systems, and weapon control networks were targeted and disrupted. Humans moved not just with physical force, but with digital precision. They demonstrated that intelligence and strategy could be as powerful as any weapon. Back on Earth, citizens followed every development with a mixture of anxiety and pride. Families watched the news feeds, listening to updates about each successful operation. Children, while too young to participate directly, learned the meaning of resilience, strategy, and courage. The story of humanity's response became a unifying force, reminding people of their shared strength and responsibility. In the enemy's territories, confusion spread quickly. Plans that had been carefully laid were unraveling faster than anticipated. Commanders struggled to communicate, defenses failed, and supply lines were cut. They had believed that humans would hesitate, that grief would slow their response. They were wrong. Humans had turned grief into determination, sorrow into strategy, and anger into disciplined action. The strike teams on the front lines continued to gather critical intelligence. Every observation, every intercepted message, and every interaction with enemy forces added to the growing understanding of the network behind the assassination. They discovered that the assassin was just a small part of a much larger plan, a plan that could have caused massive damage if left unchecked. Humans knew that dismantling this network was essential, not just for revenge, but for survival and stability in the galaxy. Throughout all operations, humans maintained a sense of morality and ethics. They avoided harming civilians and focused on strategic targets. They communicated their intentions to neutral parties, ensuring that the conflict was contained and that the actions taken were justified. This approach reinforced humanity's reputation as a species capable of combining strength with intelligence and integrity. Every successful mission boosted morale across the human worlds. Citizens, soldiers, and operatives alike felt the impact of each victory. It was not just about retaliation. It was about demonstrating that humans could act decisively, intelligently, and effectively when threatened. The world had witnessed what could happen when humanity was cornered, and now the galaxy would learn the same lesson. As the retaliation progressed, the enemy attempted to regroup and counterattack. Fleets were redirected, new patrol routes established, and defensive measures strengthened. But humans had anticipated this. Every move was calculated, every response prepared in advance. For every strike the enemy attempted, the humans had already devised a counter-strategy. It was a combination of foresight, adaptability, and relentless persistence. In the midst of this chaos, leadership remained steady. Decisions were made quickly but thoughtfully. Operations were coordinated across vast distances, with real-time intelligence guiding every action. The humans' ability to combine patience, strategy, and precision set them apart from every other species in the galaxy. They were not reckless, but they were unstoppable. Humanity's retaliation was not just about military action. It was about sending a message. The galaxy was watching, and humans wanted everyone to understand their nature. They were resilient, intelligent, and capable of extraordinary unity. They could endure loss, learn from it, and respond in ways that were both precise and principled. The assassination, meant to intimidate, had instead revealed the full extent of human potential. The first phase of retaliation concluded with a series of victories that shocked both allies and adversaries. Enemy bases were disrupted, key leaders captured, and supply networks dismantled. Humans had shown that they could respond not only with force but with intelligence, strategy, and ethical consideration. The message was clear. Humanity would defend itself and its principles, and it would do so with skill, precision, and purpose. Back on Earth, the people celebrated cautiously. There was pride in every city, every colony, every station. The story of humanity's response spread quickly, inspiring hope, determination, and a sense of shared responsibility. Citizens understood that the fight was far from over, but they also knew that humans were capable of overcoming enormous challenges when united. In the enemy's territories, disbelief and fear spread. Commanders and leaders had underestimated humanity, and they now faced a species that could combine intelligence, strategy, and resilience in ways they had never imagined. Plans were disrupted, operations failed, and the once confident enemy began to realize that they had provoked a response far beyond what they had anticipated. Through it all, humans maintained their focus. Every action was guided by purpose, every decision weighed carefully. They moved with discipline, determination, and intelligence. They understood the stakes, and they were prepared to act decisively to protect their planet, their people, and their principles. The retaliation had demonstrated one undeniable truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. They could endure loss, adapt to challenges, and respond with precision and intelligence. They could act decisively when needed, and they could maintain their principles even in the midst of conflict. The assassination had shattered the calm, but it had also revealed the true nature of humanity, a species capable of extraordinary resilience, courage, and unity. As the first waves of retaliation concluded, humans prepared for the next phase. They would continue to pursue the network behind the assassination, dismantle it completely, and ensure that the galaxy understood one simple truth. Humanity could not be intimidated, underestimated, or defeated through cowardly strikes. They had turned grief into action, anger into strategy, and fear into determination. The galaxy watched in awe and apprehension. Humans had proven that they could respond not only with strength, but wit. The galaxy held its breath. For weeks, humans had been moving with careful precision, striking enemy positions, disrupting their networks, and showing that they could respond with intelligence and discipline. Yet even after so many victories, the challenge had only grown larger. The enemy had regrouped and consolidated forces, gathering fleets from distant territories and preparing for a confrontation that they hoped would crush human resolve. They had underestimated humanity once, but now, the scale of the coming battle would reveal just how wrong they had been. Human leaders knew that this moment would define them. Every ship, Every operative and every citizen understood the stakes. The conflict was no longer about retaliation alone. It was about survival, about proving that humanity could endure, adapt, and prevail even against overwhelming odds. They had learned from every previous engagement, every intelligence report, and every preparation phase. Every detail mattered, and humans had ensured that nothing would be left to chance. The largest fleet humanity had ever assembled moved into position. It was not just a collection of ships. It was a living, coordinated force. Carriers, cruisers, fighters, and support vessels formed a precise formation, each unit ready to execute its role with exacting discipline. Engineers had upgraded engines, weapons, and shields to ensure peak performance. Every soldier, pilot, and crew member had been trained, tested, and prepared for the pressure of a conflict that could determine the fate of their species. From Earth to the outer colonies, citizens watched the movement with awe and tension. Families gathered around screens, students followed updates, and communities held briefings to explain the strategies being used. For the first time, the world was united not just in mourning, but in focus, determination, and resolve. Humanity's story had become one of courage, intelligence, and unity, and everyone felt part of it no matter where they were. The enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace near a strategic star system. Their ships were larger in number, heavily armored and armed with devastating weapons. They believed that sheer force would overwhelm humans, but they did not account for human ingenuity, coordination, and the willingness to adapt to any challenge. Humans had studied the enemy for weeks, tracking movement patterns, weapon capabilities, and communication channels. Every advantage they could gain had been calculated and prepared. The first engagement was sudden. Enemy ships opened fire, but human forces responded immediately. Precision targeting disabled critical weapons before they could cause major damage. Fighters swooped through asteroid fields using natural cover to evade enemy fire. Command ships coordinated the movement of entire squadrons, ensuring that every attack was supported and every vulnerability covered. Humans were not just reacting. They were controlling the battle, turning the enemy's assumptions against them. As the battle raged, cyber operations played a crucial role. Human teams infiltrated enemy systems, shutting down shields, rerouting communications, and creating opportunities for their fleets to strike with maximum effect. Enemy ships became confused, their coordination disrupted, and morale began to falter. The humans had combined technology, strategy, and timing in a way that left the opposition struggling to respond. On one of the frontline battleships, operatives worked tirelessly. Their eyes scanned multiple screens, analyzing incoming data and adjusting strategies in real time. Every movement was calculated, every decision weighed against potential consequences. They were calm under pressure, disciplined, and relentless. Their focus was not on glory, but on ensuring that every action contributed to the larger mission, protecting humanity and dismantling the threat. Meanwhile, reconnaissance teams identified the enemy command center. The fleet moved strategically, using smaller, agile vessels to probe defenses and create openings for larger ships. Humans exploited every advantage in their environment, from asteroid fields to gravitational anomalies, turning natural obstacles into tools of strategy. Every maneuver was designed to minimize risk while maximizing impact. The enemy, realizing that they were facing more than a typical response, began to panic. Orders conflicted, communication lines faltered, and coordination collapsed. They had believed humans would falter under pressure, but instead, humans had adapted to every challenge and used it against them. The very confidence that had driven the enemy to plan the assassination now worked to humanity's advantage. At the same time, strategic weapons were prepared. Humanity had developed advanced systems capable of precise, overwhelming strikes. One of these weapons, a planet-cracking railgun powered by a miniature energy core, was positioned for maximum effect. It was a tool of last resort, designed to neutralize the most critical threats while minimizing collateral damage. Its preparation required careful coordination and trust, and the crew executing it had trained for this exact scenario countless times. The turning point came when the human fleet executed a coordinated assault on the enemy command center. Fighters penetrated defenses, carriers deployed support units, and precision strikes targeted critical infrastructure. Enemy ships that had seemed unbeatable were disabled one by one. Systems went offline, communications fell silent, and chaos spread through the enemy ranks. Humanity's meticulous planning had created a situation in which even overwhelming numbers could not guarantee victory. During the battle, human operatives on the ground and in space maintained contact with Earth and colony command centers. Real-time intelligence flowed seamlessly, allowing decisions to be made and executed with precision. It was a display of unity, coordination, and adaptability that no other species had yet demonstrated. Humans were acting not as separate planets or colonies, but as one organism, each part contributing to the survival and success of the whole. As the command center was neutralized, the enemy attempted a desperate counterattack, but humans anticipated it. Fleets adjusted positions instantly, creating traps and bottlenecks that turned enemy maneuvers into liabilities. Fighters exploited weaknesses in shields, and cyber teams intercepted and redirected enemy commands. Every move was countered with thought, calculation, and precision. The battle continued for hours, but the momentum had shifted. Humans were no longer reacting. They were controlling the conflict. Enemy forces were scattered, their plans dismantled, and their morale broken. The humans had demonstrated not only strength, but intelligence, resilience, and unity. Every operation, every maneuver, and every calculated risk had brought them closer to victory. Meanwhile, back on Earth, citizens followed updates with a mixture of pride and concern. Families gathered in homes and public centers, tracking the progress of the fleet. Children learned about strategy, courage, and the importance of preparation. Communities reinforced the message that the fight was not just about weapons, it was about intelligence, discipline, and the shared values that defined humanity. By the time the battle concluded, the enemy fleet was in disarray. Key leaders had been captured or neutralized, strategic positions dismantled, and their network exposed. Humans had achieved a decisive victory, but they did not celebrate recklessly. Every action had been purposeful, and the consequences of each decision had been carefully considered. Humanity had proven its capabilities, but it had also demonstrated its principles. Strength was not enough. They had combined courage, intelligence, and ethics to succeed. The galaxy watched in awe. Even civilizations that had doubted humans now reconsidered their assumptions. This species, once underestimated, had demonstrated an ability to endure loss, adapt to challenges, and respond with precision and intelligence. They had shown that they could act decisively, maintain their principles, and unite across planets and colonies. Humanity had not only survived, they had triumphed. On Earth, the people honored the fallen leader, whose vision had guided this response. Her legacy had inspired not only strategic planning, but also the unity and resolve that had made the victory possible. Citizens understood that the strength of humanity was not in weapons alone, but in discipline, intelligence, creativity, and the willingness to act for the greater good. The enemy, in the aftermath, realized the depth of human capability. They had underestimated a species that could endure grief, plan meticulously, and act decisively. They had believed they could intimidate and manipulate, but humans had turned tragedy into strategy, anger into precision, and loss into unity. The galaxy had witnessed the birth of a force that could not easily be challenged. With the battle won, humans consolidated their positions, secured captured intelligence, and prepared for the next phase. There were still challenges ahead, but the turning point had been achieved. Humanity had shown that it could face overwhelming odds, overcome them, and maintain its principles throughout. It was not just a victory, it was a statement to the galaxy. Humans had been tested, and they had answered. They had demonstrated resilience, intelligence, and unity. They had adapted to every challenge, responded to every threat, and maintained their moral clarity. The galaxy now knew that humanity could endure, adapt, and triumph, no matter the obstacles. As fleets returned to orbit, operatives secured captured data, and communities on Earth celebrated cautiously. One truth was clear: humans had changed. They had faced their greatest challenge yet and emerged stronger, more united, and more determined. The dust of battle had settled, but the echoes of what had happened were still felt across the stars. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, endured loss, and demonstrated strength, intelligence, and unity that no one in the galaxy had expected. Now came the time to rebuild, reflect, and secure the future. The victory was decisive, but humans knew that true success would not be measured by a single battle. It would be measured by how they used their lessons to protect the planet, their people, and the principles that had guided them through the crisis. Back on Earth, the streets were alive with quiet celebration. People did not shout or cheer in reckless joy. They understood the cost of the conflict. Families hugged each other tightly, communities shared meals, and people of all ages came together in a collective sense of relief and pride. The victory was theirs, but it was also a reminder of what they had endured and what they must continue to protect. Every city, colony, and space station had stories to tell. The engineers who had worked around the clock to repair ships and improve weapons were hailed not just as technicians, but as heroes whose contributions had saved countless lives. Students who had assisted in simulations and intelligence analysis were recognized for their insights. Every citizen who had played a part, no matter how small, had contributed to the triumph. Humanity had proven that unity and cooperation were as powerful as any weapon. The captured intelligence from the enemy network was carefully analyzed. Strategists and scientists worked side by side to understand every detail of the conspiracy that had led to the assassination. It revealed not only the enemy's plans, but also hidden technologies, secret routes, and alliances that could have been disastrous if left unchecked. Humans documented everything, creating a knowledge base that would make future attacks nearly impossible. They learned from every mistake the enemy had made and every advantage they had exploited, ensuring that humanity would remain prepared for whatever might come next. Across the galaxy, other species took notice. Many who had doubted humanity before were now reconsidering their assumptions. Diplomats and leaders began reaching out, some cautiously, others with newfound respect. The message was clear. Humans were not a species to be underestimated. They could endure, they could adapt, and they could act with intelligence, discipline, and moral clarity. Humanity's victory was not just military, it was a statement of their character, their resilience, and their place in the galaxy. Even in the midst of rebuilding, humans did not forget the fallen leader whose assassination had sparked the conflict. Memorials were held on every continent, every colony, and aboard space stations. Stories of courage, wisdom, and leadership were shared, reminding people of the values that had guided them through the darkest times. The leader's vision had inspired not just military strategy, but the unity and determination that had turned grief into action. The lessons from that legacy would guide humanity for generations. The fleets that had fought in the battle returned home, their ships carrying both veterans and data critical for the future. Crews were honored for their bravery, but they also knew that their role had been part of something greater. Every action had been coordinated, every decision calculated, and every mission executed with precision. They had not only defended humanity, they had demonstrated the power of unity, intelligence, and moral courage. Reconstruction efforts extended beyond military assets. Cities and colonies affected by enemy strikes were rebuilt, using advanced technology and community-driven initiatives. Engineers designed more resilient structures, scientists developed better energy and defense systems, and volunteers worked tirelessly to restore normalcy. Humans understood that security was not only about fleets and weapons, it was also about infrastructure, education, and social cohesion. A strong society, after all, was a society that could endure anything. Communication networks were upgraded not just for security, but to foster cooperation across planets. Humans had learned that isolation could be dangerous, and they wanted every colony to be connected, informed, and capable of responding to threats. The galaxy had witnessed their discipline and intelligence, and humans were determined to ensure that future generations would inherit both strength and wisdom. In the midst of rebuilding, new alliances began to form. Species that had been indifferent or dismissive of humanity before were now seeking partnerships, cooperation, and knowledge sharing. Humans approached these relationships carefully, balancing diplomacy with vigilance. They had proven their capability, but they also understood the value of trust and strategy. Every decision in forming alliances was guided by intelligence, foresight, and principle. Back on Earth, citizens took part in what could be described as a renaissance of human spirit. Schools included lessons about resilience, strategy, and unity. Communities encouraged volunteerism and problem-solving. Technology and creativity were celebrated, not just for innovation but for their role in strengthening society. Humanity had survived the greatest test it had faced, and people wanted to ensure that every child understood what had made their species capable of triumph. The captured enemy operatives were held under strict but humane conditions. Humans ensured that justice was served according to principles that were fair, ethical, and deliberate. Interrogation and investigation were conducted to uncover every detail of the assassination network and its plans. It was a reminder to both humanity and the galaxy that strength was not measured solely by force, but also by intelligence, ethics, and discipline. Humanity's actions created a ripple effect across space. Species that had been aggressive, dismissive, or opportunistic began reconsidering their stance toward humans. Diplomacy was no longer merely formal. It was informed by respect, caution, and recognition of human capability. The victory had not only secured survival but had also reshaped perceptions, establishing humans as a serious and capable presence in the galaxy. Technology developed during the crisis was shared carefully. Defensive systems, communication networks, and analytical tools were refined for civilian use, education, and exploration. Humans understood that progress was a responsibility as much as an advantage. Every advancement served the dual purpose of security and the betterment of society. The lessons of crisis had inspired innovation that would benefit generations to come. While the galaxy began to recognize human strength, Earth itself was transformed. Communities were more united, cooperation was more valued, and citizens had a renewed sense of purpose. They had seen what humanity could achieve when united, disciplined, and guided by principle. Every individual, whether directly involved in the conflict or not, understood that they were part of something larger, a species capable of surviving adversity, defending its values, and inspiring others. Across colonies and planets, memorials were created for the people who had sacrificed everything. Every soldier, operative, and civilian who had contributed to the victory was honored. Their courage, dedication, and intelligence became examples of what it meant to be human. Stories of resilience were shared across generations, ensuring that the lessons learned during the crisis would never be forgotten. The galaxy had been tested as much as humanity had. Other species began reevaluating their own strategies, alliances, and perceptions. Humanity had shown that even a species that had once been underestimated could endure loss, respond with intelligence and precision, and act with principle. The lessons were not lost on those who had once dismissed humans as inexperienced or naive. Humanity's triumph was not defined by conquest, but by unity, intelligence, and moral clarity. They had turned grief into action, tragedy into strategy, and anger into discipline. They had faced overwhelming odds, adapted to every challenge, and emerged not only victorious but wiser, stronger, and more united. It was a demonstration of the true nature of the species, resilient, capable, and principled. Even as humans rebuilt, they continued to train, innovate, and prepare for the future. Lessons from the conflict were incorporated into education, strategy, and governance. Humans understood that security was a constant responsibility, and that preparation, intelligence, and unity were essential to survival. Every new generation learned not just about technology and combat, but about courage, ethics, and the power of cooperation. As the galaxy settled into a new equilibrium, humanity stood taller than ever. They had faced the greatest challenge of their era, endured loss, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. The assassination had been a test, and humans had passed it with distinction. Their victory was not only a defense of their planet and people, it was a declaration of capability, principle, and resilience that the galaxy would never forget. In the years that followed, humans expanded exploration, diplomacy, and collaboration across space. The lessons of the crisis guided every decision. They were careful, intelligent, and deliberate. They were also confident, courageous, and united. Humanity had been tested, and they had answered. Their story became an inspiration, a reminder that no matter the odds, humans could endure, adapt, and prevail with intelligence, discipline, and principle. And so, as fleets patrolled the stars, communities thrived on planets and colonies, and children learned the stories of resilience and courage. One truth was clear. Humanity had faced its darkest hour, endured loss, and